Okay, I think we can start now. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. It is indeed a beautiful day. It is now feeling like spring, unlike the other days. So I hope we are going to enjoy the sunshine today. Thank you so much for joining us for our live webinar today. To those who don't know me, my name is Petronila Ntabele, and I'm the Director of Strategic Communications and Stakeholder Relations, and I'll be guiding you through today's program. But before we begin, I would like to invite my colleague, Susan McCree, Program Manager, Supported Living, to give the land acknowledgement. Susan, over to you.
Thank you, Patty. Today, we acknowledge that we are gathering on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and that Toronto, Ontario, and Canada is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the William Treaties signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. I want to acknowledge the long-standing contributions of Indigenous people to what is now known as Ontario, especially their relationship and connection to the land and environment as caretakers and teachers for future generations. And I want to acknowledge the history of treaty making and note that hundreds of years after they were signed, the treaties between Indigenous people and first settlers remain relevant today. There is a strong connection between the past, the present, and the future. Indigenous histories, Indigenous cultures, and Indigenous contemporary issues are relevant now more than ever, both in the current socio-political climate of Canada and across the globe. For other Indigenous communities that struggle to maintain connection with their lands. I also acknowledge that we are all treaty peoples, including those who came here as settlers, as migrants either in this generation or in generations past, and those of us who came here involuntarily, particularly as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. Today, we pay tribute to the ancestors of those of African and Indigenous origin and descent. I also want to acknowledge the important contributions of Afro-Caribbean Canadians to the socio-political fabric of Canada and their shared connection to Indigenous nations. As I thought about and wrote on this land acknowledgement, the idea of connection and being connected wove it all together. As a first-generation Canadian, I endeavored to understand my own connection to this land, my connection to those that have come before me, and my connection to future generations, and how I can contribute to future generations in a meaningful way. I also acknowledge my responsibility to honor the rights of Indigenous communities, both locally and globally. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Susan, for taking the time to prepare the land acknowledgement and sharing your experiences. Much appreciated. We do have a lot to cover today, and on your screen is the agenda for today. We are going to start by getting an update on the Family Networking Forum that is taking place in April. We'll also have updates on community participation supports and from the RESPECT team, and a presentation from individualized passport supports, as well as our fireside chat. And we welcome Nadia El-Karadli, our 75th anniversary storyteller. So we are committed to addressing the topics that you want to hear from us. And if you have any other topics that you want us to address, please feel free to reach out to our team. But before we move on, there are a few housekeeping items I would like to highlight. We ask that you please use the Q&A function to make a comment or ask a question, and kindly let Atam Perederi know if you're experiencing any technical details. Atam, may you please put your details in the chat if you have not already done some. So Before we move on, I would like to also note that our first presentation today is going to be on family forum that is taking place. Angela Bradley, I'm not so sure if you're ready. I would like to start with you. And then after Angela, we are going to move on to community participation, supports, and respite. So without any further delay, I would like to invite Angela Bradley, our Senior Director, to give us an update on the forthcoming forum. Angela, over to you.
Sure. I think there is a slide that there is available for sharing, and I hope that most of you have heard about this. But Microboards Ontario, the executive director who is Karen Bell, who used to work at Community Living Toronto and has spoken recently at a couple of our own Community Living Toronto events. Is the executive director and is hosting a family forum in April. I'm actually pulling up the document in front of me right now to get the date right. April 20th from 9:30 to 4:30 at the Sheridan Parkway North. It's going to be a really, really great day. They're going to be covering a lot of the where things are with Journey to Belonging and how it's going to affect families and what we predict is going to be sort of next steps. They're also going to talk about how to create a sustainable microboard. A lot of our families are interested in doing that for the future of their loved one. And then our own James Gennaro is hopefully going to be speaking about the work that they've done towards a national caregiving strategy. And I know we've shared that documentation before across the association where the Canadian Centre for Caregiving Excellence has put together a strategy and is pushing it to the federal government to really look at the role of caregivers, both paid and unpaid. So family members, as well as many of you who are caregiving for people we support, and the things that we all need to be successful and that we all need to be able to take care of ourselves, as well as to take care of others, and how organizations, agencies, and the government can do better in terms of supporting that role that so many of us are playing both personally and professionally. Nick Foley is the keynote speaker. If any of you have heard Nick Foley talk before, he's great, a lot of fun. He's got a lot of great insights into organizational change and coaching and things like that. So he'll be talking about, I don't know what his actual keynote is going to address, but he always brings great insights to these days. And then lastly, I get to be part of a panel of How Do I? And this is when you work with somebody for a long time and they call in a favor that you forgot that you'd given to them and maybe wrote on a sticky note. So Karen called in a favor and has asked Anne-Marie and I to be on a panel along with Kelly Casey. And I just keep reminding Anne-Marie that when they ask questions I don't know the answer to, I will defer to my more senior colleague to answer those. But it looks like it's going to be a great day. It really is targeted to a lot of different audiences. And if you have a chance to come out, I'd love to see you there. I think that's it.
Thank you so much, Angie. We hope everything will go well. And as Angie indicated, families with or interested in learning more about microboards, please feel free to register. And I'll also ask Atom to put the registration details in the chat. So thank you so much for providing that quick update. We continue moving on with our program, and I would like now to invite Joe Persaud, our Senior Director of CPS and Respite, to provide an update. Joe?
Great. Thank you, Patty, and welcome everyone. I'll just jump right to the second slide. Thank you. So registrations for our CPS spring sessions have begun. Sorry, let me just start my timer here. And spring session programs for those who are in funded programs will run from April 8th to June 28th. To register, please visit My Community Hub, and I'll share details about our fee-for-service spring sessions on the next slide. And just as a reminder that our children's respite programs are offered out of Lawson in the east of the city and Ennerdale in the west. Our adult respite program at our newly renovated Sibley location, long awaited, will be opening soon, and intake has already commenced. Contact information for our respite choices is on the last slide of the deck and can also be found on our website anytime. Next slide, please. Thank you. So along with registration for our funded folks, My Community Hub is also the platform to register for our CPS fee-for-service sessions at Community Junction and Creative Village Studio. Our dedicated fee-for-service spring sessions begin on April 2nd, and we offer day, evening, and weekend options. They include in-person and virtual program offerings as well. Not yet, thank you. To learn more about our CPS offerings, please visit our website where you'll find our experience guide and fee-for-service brochures anytime as well. Next slide. All right, so it is the end of an era and the beginning of a new one. Our lease is coming to an end on March 31st at our Creative Village Studio location at the corner of Dundas West and Burnhamthorpe, and we will be vacating this location by June 30th. We will, however, complete our fee-for-service spring sessions at this location as scheduled, so there's no disruption to our spring session offerings. And we are planning to replicate the Creative Village Studio model at our Community Junction site, which is located up the street near the corner of Dundas West and Keele Street, to continue our fee-for-service offerings. And we plan to expand to deliver the Creative Village model at the East Mall as well. And we're, like I said, while we're sad to leave this area that we've been embedded in for quite a few years, we're excited about the potential to grow the model that Creative Village has created. All right, next slide, please. All right, our partnership with the third-party organization called Recreational Respite to deliver virtual sessions to our funded individuals will continue in the spring with Monday to Friday morning and afternoon options, as well as Saturday options. To register, please contact Caitlin Close, CPS Program Manager, and you'll see her contact information and the general CPS contact info at the bottom of the slide for your convenience. We are planning to transition these virtual offerings over the next several months to our in-house recreation therapists, and we will be providing updates throughout the next several months to keep you informed during this transition period. But everything is a go for the next session as is. Next slide, please. So we have onboarded 2 recreation therapists, Jessica and Natalie, and they are already making an impact as seen on this slide with a leisure education session that Jessica facilitated recently. And as I mentioned on the last slide, they will be working to transition our virtual CPS options from recreational respite to be delivered directly by CLTO staff, and we're excited about that transition. Next slide, please. So on March 13th, we were very happy to welcome again the Graham Irish dancers to the East Mall for a performance of Irish dancing during Irish Heritage Month. By the way, happy Irish Heritage Month. A special thank you to Jennifer Warnell, Senior Program Manager in Specialized Services, for continuing to make these arrangements as the people we support and our staff have thoroughly enjoyed these performances over the years. And it's a good sign that we're getting past the pandemic, because they've come out regularly pre-pandemic for these performances. Next slide, please. Thank you also to Melanie Hooker and Flora Nichols for leading the engagement efforts for college placement students in our CPS programs. On March 5th, they facilitated an interactive, engaging, and informative session with guest speakers coming from across several different program areas. And we hope to attract these students to apply to work at CLTO, hopefully in the near future. And essentially, we are investing in our future workforce. Next slide. Thank you. And as I mentioned, here's the contact information. You can contact us with any questions and concerns. And I'll move to the next slide. Thank you. So it was a very active and fun March break for our Children's Respite Program, where they enjoyed visits to Ripley's Aquarium, the Disney Immersive Experience, visited local parks, and enjoyed baking and eating some yummy treats that they made. Thanks to the Respite teams for making this another successful and memorable March break for the children. And a quick reminder that registration for our summer respite options is open, and you'll see contact information on the last slide and always posted on our website for you to access anytime. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. In a previous Family and Friends webinar, I think it was in January, I announced our exciting new partnership with the Canadian Centre for Caregiving Excellence, the Azrieli Foundation, and Destination Toronto, where 12 families that access CLTO respite services have an opportunity for a 2-night weekend getaway at a hotel in the city that includes transportation to and from the hotel, meals, and tickets to 2 activities or local attractions. I'm happy to report that 12 families were selected using the selection criteria on the slide you see there. If you are a family receiving respite services from CLTO and are interested in expressing interest for this wonderful opportunity in the future, please contact our Respite Choices team and we'll place your name on a list for future opportunities. Also, you may still have an opportunity this year on short notice, however, if one of the 12 selected families cancel their scheduled weekend. We will refer to the list of families who are on the list of expressing interest. And finally, I think my last slide is the contact information for our Respite Choices team and the leadership team, and sorry, the general contact information, the leadership team. So contact us anytime. We'd be happy to hear from you. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe, for providing an update on those great programs and activities coming up this spring. We hope to see some of you in the community. Next, I would like to invite Carrie Hill, Supervisor Individualized Passport Supports, for a presentation on the supports and services through the program. Carrie, please take it.
Thank you, Patty. It's great to be here today. I'm a supervisor in our Individualized Passport Supports program. And today I'm going to spend a bit of time talking to you just generally about passport funding, just to give some education if there's people out there who aren't aware of it or aren't sure what it is, or to give more details to people who do have funding. Next slide, please. So the Ontario Passport Program is a program that helps adults with an intellectual disability to participate in their communities and also to give caregivers a break. It's funded through the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services, and it's administered by local passport agencies. And the passport agency in Toronto is Family Service Toronto. It is individualized funding. So funding amounts are based on a needs assessment tool. And recipients can choose to self-manage their funding or to ask an agency to help them to manage the funds. It is a reimbursement program, so you do have to incur your expenses first, and then they get submitted to Passport One, which is a provincial entity that processes all of the claims, and they reimburse for any allowable expenses. Next slide, please. So what can passport funding be used for? I'm just going to highlight a few on this screen. So community participation supports is obviously a really large one. So that can be anything from attending events, community center, going to area local venues, and activities of daily living. I want to highlight the technology. So it can be used for technology with a maximum of $3,000 per fiscal year. And that can be anything from a computer or a laptop or an iPad to a cell phone. It will also pay cell phone bills and internet as well. And CPS supplies and equipment has a maximum of $2,000 per year. And that can be used for things to have activities at home. So it could be games, it could be books, arts and crafts, hobby supplies, and fitness equipment. The funding can also be used for person-directed planning and for administrative supports. And I just want to highlight, I think stories are important to tell, so I have a bunch if I can get through them today, but just want to highlight these 2 photos. So the gentleman in the top photo, his name is George, and because he got funding, he was able to attend his very first Maple Leafs game. And then in the bottom, we have Richard, and Richard is at the CNE with his support staff, Paula. Richard, you used to be supported in our supported independent living program and lived with his roommate for about 24 years. And unfortunately, Richard had to move out into long-term care. So Richard and his roommate didn't see each other for quite a while. And when he received passport funding, they were able to reconnect. And they're able now to go out together, and they've done events like going to Ripley's, a Blue Jays game, and going to movies. Next slide, please. So what is not eligible? So again, I'm just going to highlight a few of these. So groceries, food, and restaurant meals are not eligible. A vacation or holiday travel or accommodation, so that would be anything that would be an overnight stay, is not eligible. Tuition fees, if they're covered by OSAP for post-secondary education, they're not eligible. However, if OSAP does not cover the program or the class, it can be put through your passport funding. It also won't cover transportation to medical appointments, shopping, banking, errands, or custody visits. So the focus on the transportation is for the community participation supports. And then it also will no longer cover cable, TV channels, streaming services, media subscriptions, and gaming related items. Next slide, please. The passport program guidelines were updated effective last April the 1st, so April 1st, 2023. And the temporary expenses that were put into place because of COVID, the eligible expenses that have now been added to the permanent guidelines are technology, which I spoke about earlier, and the CPS supplies and equipment. And then there were some temporary eligible expenses that are no longer admissible. So that would be the gaming related items, cable and TV channels, behavioral interventions, and essential service delivery fees. Next slide, please. So if you don't have passport funding, how do you get it? So anybody who is eligible to receive service through Developmental Services Ontario is also eligible to receive passport funding. So it's making a call to DSO and asking to be referred for passport funding and to go on the list to receive the base amount, which is $5,500 per year, and also to request if additional funding is put out based on the assessment tool and the application package that's done through DSO. So you could ask to be waiting for additional funding as well. Next slide, please. So individualized passport supports at Community Living Toronto. So we have been supporting individuals with their funding since 2006. And that first year, we brought in 10 individuals to support. And today this is our 23-24 fiscal year. We have supported 535 individuals. 146 are supported through our community program. So that can be anybody that's living independently. They might be in an external organization. They might be living in a shelter or have an adult protective service worker. And then we're also supporting 389 individuals who live in our supported living services. And our total amount of funding that we're managing currently is $3.7 million. Next slide, please. So what to expect if you're looking for Community Living Toronto to support you with your funding. We do what's called a passport consult initially, and you'll meet with the passport team. We gather information about your funding and any documents that need to be completed. We meet with the individual, their support team, and we want to really get to know them and find out about their goals, talk about the guidelines, review any documents that need to be completed, and then talk about the options for managing funding and how CLTO can support an individual with their funding. And then we develop an individualized budget. So every individual that we support has their own budget, and that's based on their funding amount, their goals and interests, and their support needs. Next slide. Our community program, we have 5 full-time community support workers. And so they are responsible for attending the consult and intake meeting to get to meet the individual, learn more about their goals, and really just to start developing that connection. They also meet annually with the individual and their support team, and they review the individual's goals for the current year and talk about what the individual would like to do with their funding for the next year and develop the budget for the following year. They also meet regularly and they do regular planning with all the individuals they're supporting, and that can be done weekly, monthly, but it is an ongoing process. And they're also responsible for all purchases, coordinating support shifts and expense management. Next slide, please. We also have 10 part-time support workers, and so they will be out with the individuals in the community supporting them throughout the city. And they can do anything from art classes to going to local venues, community centers, whatever the activity is that the individual wants to participate in, the staff is there to support them. And the shifts can occur weekdays, evenings, and weekends. Next slide. Oh, sorry, I have to tell you about Dawn. So Dawn's favorite place to visit is Casa Loma. So this is a picture of Dawn outside Casa Loma looking at an old vintage car. Next slide. This is our leadership team. So our information is there. If you have any questions or you want more information about the funding or how we support people, you can absolutely reach out to me. But I do want to share a couple of stories if I have a couple of minutes. just to show you the impact that the funding has for individuals when they receive it. And for some people, it might seem like little things, but it's actually really big things that actually change people's lives. So we had an individual who was trying for 4 years to apply for a Fare Pass, which is a Metro Pass that you can get through the City of Toronto. If you're eligible for ODSP, it's at a reduced rate. And she was not successful in doing it. But once she connected with our community program, the support staff was able to help her to apply for the card. And we actually just found out this morning that she was approved. So that's fabulous for her. There was another individual whose dream was to go ziplining, and she was able to use her funding to go ziplining in Niagara Falls. This is a really neat story. An individual had a vintage record player that belonged to his father, and unfortunately it didn't work. But with the funding, we were able to find a place for it to get fixed, and it's functional now, and he's able to use it. And when it was delivered by the community support worker, he actually cried because he was so happy that he was going to be able to use it. Another individual that likes to go to Raptors games, he gets so excited when he's there that he FaceTimes his brothers at every game to make sure they know he's there and that he's having a really good time. There's an individual that was really reluctant to get a cell phone, but it was really important for her to have one just to stay connected and to be able to, to be able to connect with people in her community. So she decided to get one, and with the support of her community support worker, she was able to learn how to use it and now is independent with being able to use it. Another individual had a really big goal since 2020, and that was to get her G1 license. This year, she was able to finally achieve that goal, and now she's looking forward to taking driving lessons in the spring. Another individual who lives in a shelter where it's not always safe was able to buy books and crafts that are really important to her, and she will tell you that it helps her to calm down when she's at home. Another individual, we pay his monthly cell phone bill, and he's actually estranged from his family. But because he had his phone and it was consistently being paid, he's able to find his brothers, reconnect with them, and now they're able to stay in regular contact with each other. This same individual receives weekly support from one of our part-time staff, Camille, and he will tell you that she is kind, patient, and understanding. And at the start of their shift, the first thing she does is she helps him to carry his laundry down the stairs, because without that, he's not able to complete it. And that's just caused him issues with hygiene and that kind of thing. And he's so excited now because now he can do his laundry independently once it's carried down for him. And he says that he feels pride in completing it, and also just a sense of accomplishment and a huge change to his appearance. Another individual who's been in and out of hospital this year with some mental health needs. He's really benefited from having staff support and companionship, just to let him know that there are people out there that are there to support him. So those are a few of the stories that just to show you the impact that passport funding has for individuals, and just wanted to make sure that I could share some of those with you today. Next slide. So some passport resources. I'm not sure if everyone is aware, but the passport program does have its own website now. So you can visit that for more information. The copy of the guidelines is there and other important information. And then I wanted to just talk about My Direct Plan. So My Direct Plan is an electronic method to submit passport and SSAH expenses. Users have access to tools that allow them to track their expenses and view their total and remaining funds. You can invite support workers to join, and they can electronically approve expenses created within My Direct Plan. It can be accessed from any device and also has a mobile app available. And it's also available to private service agencies and brokers if they want to use it as a tool. So that is my information for today. If you want any additional information, you can absolutely reach out, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kerry, for the detailed presentation on the passport program and My Direct Plan. And thank you for sharing the heartwarming stories that help to demonstrate the impact of the program. Much appreciated. And next, we have our fireside chat with our 75th anniversary storyteller, Nadia El-Karadli. Nadia is an advocate of her brothers Amir's journey and envisions a world where everyone belongs. Thank you for joining us today, Nadia, and over to you, Brad and Nadia.
Thank you for
Thanks.
having me.
Thanks, Petronella. Good to see you, Nadia.
Good to see you, Brad.
Just before we jump in, Carrie, thanks for the stories around Passport and how people are using their passport and taking advantage of what's available in community. That's great, great work, and great to hear those stories. Also, a bit of a plug for My Direct Plan that you talked about and being able to manage your money online and speed up reimbursements, especially as we're getting into the crunch time at the end of the fiscal year. If you don't have an account, now would be a time to jump in and give it a try. So Nadia, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
You were one of our 75th anniversary storytellers, but your connection with Community Living Toronto goes back before that, so we'll get into that. But maybe you could start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your family and your connection to us.
Sure. Well, like you all said, thank you so much. My name is Nadia El-Kharadli. I am the firstborn child of a family of 4 of Egyptian Canadian immigrants. My parents came here in the mid-70s. I was born in 1980, and then a mess of brothers came after me. So there's 3 brothers after me, and Amir is the youngest. Amir has been a community living client for as long as I can remember. When I was younger, it was my parents, obviously, that kind of looked after his education and worked very, very hard to ensure he got whatever opportunities that we could get for him. And obviously, community living played very heavily in that. His job coach, Cynthia, who I believe is now retired, was basically a member of our family. She was incredible in guiding him through work experience. I know that was a big thing for him. You know, we're kind of a family of hustlers. My dad's an entrepreneur. He's owned his own business for as long as we can remember. You know, we've all worked in various jobs, and for a long time, that was Amir's focus, was getting work experience and, you know, working in jobs where he was engaged and excited and interested in what he was doing. And as he got older and as, you know, kind of the climate changed and he watched, you know, my dad move more into an entrepreneurial role, and he watched my brothers and I kind of experiment in that field as well. You know, we all had full-time jobs for the most part, but he would see us doing our side hustles and different things. So he's been very passionate and engaged about kind of the idea of work and business in general. So kind of where I came back into the community living fold was as my parents were getting older, and obviously the landscape is changing, and going back a bit, you know, kind of about our background, obviously having a 9-to-5 full-time job is the goal, is the dream, especially for that generation and for every generation. We all need to eat, we all need to make money. But, you know, as someone who became used to not just having one job, you know, I had a full-time job, but I would also do things on the side. You know, now I help with the family business. I do my own, you know, various things as well. But, you know, having that mindset of, yes, this is great that he has this full-time job. You know, my parents did a wonderful job getting him into a company that he's been in for several years now, and he's done very well, but he still had that fire under him, that kind of passionate vibe of really wanting to see what that my own business idea was like. So I saw that in him. I saw him, you know, not, I think, feeling as stimulated as he wanted to with regards to work, and still wanting to obviously make our family happy, be responsible. So I actually reached out to a friend of mine, Marwa, who was working with you guys at Community Living for a long time, and bless her, she connected me with Angela. And Angela, as we know, is a superstar from the jump when she got on this call. Her star status came and shone on all of us. So she and I had a bunch of wonderful chats about this. This was all during the pandemic, a time where many people, you know, got a vibe where they wanted to maybe experiment and do other things in life. Amir was no exception. And I think that that's a big part of both what I've learned about my journey watching him and supporting him, and also learning so much more from community living, is that part of this whole idea of belonging and creating these pathways for individuals like my brother is to recognize that just because they have their challenges, just because they have their differences, as we all do, doesn't mean that they're exempt from the same passions and dreams and wants that the more neurotypical of us may have. So that
Yeah.
was something that I reached out to Angela, and she connected me with Nick and Petra, and we went through the person-directed planning process with Amir. So we done a similar kind of a Zoom about that, talking about his experience with that. He actually got to be present with me on that one, and he loved that process. We even did a business canvas, which, as someone who's done my own kind of business work and different incubators and things, like, I've had to do a business canvas. So it was really impressive to me to watch him go through that process and to just see how, I mean, this may sound strange, but how seriously everyone took the process. Like it was like he went through his personal business incubator. It was that he had people who were taking him seriously. They were listening to what he was excited about, what he was interested in. Is he still learning the lingo? Is he still learning to, express exactly what he wants? Is he even still figuring out what he wants? Absolutely. But seeing how he was, it was just so authentically received and supported was just really incredible. And then from the person-directed planning, I believe Cynthia had already applied for the passport funding for him previous to that, but then that kind of again came over to me, and I was like, okay, how can we, now that we've done this plan, leverage this funding that we have to do something for him? So he even was looking at job coaches, business coaches, because again, that was Cynthia's title for so
Right.
long, and she was such a wonderful beacon of support for him for all those years. So we actually found him an entrepreneurship coach, who was actually a friend
Oh,
of
wow.
mine who has experience with the Learning Disabilities Association of Ontario. She's diagnosed with a learning disability as well as I believe, neurodivergence ADHD as well. So she's very used to advocating for herself, number one, working through having to learn your own way and your own methods. And she just has such a great way, with Amir. Like, he's creating NFTs now. He's got a Shopify store. Like, he's a hustler.
Wow.
Gaming is his thing. That was what he wanted to get into. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. He knows that. And so, yeah, that was the
Finding a
journey.
place for himself and
Not only finding a place for himself, but really showing the rest of us that he has a right to finding that place and to seeking that place, and that his drive should be as respected and supported as any of ours.
right.
So that's what he taught us.
So, and you touched there, and you spoke about another superstar, sort of Petra, who just retired from our organization. She
What
sort
are
of,
you guys doing
I
without, like,
know,
these stars? You have just sit on them. Don't
I
let them
know,
leave.
I know.
I'm
So
looking at
the
you,
person,
Angela.
yeah, the person-directed planning process is something that she was very passionate about, very good at, and did hundreds of them over the years. There's Angela blushing a little bit, waving at me.
Aw.
So it's great to hear that, because a lot of times those plans happen, you draw a lot of stuff on the walls, you brainstorm ideas, and people participate. But it's nice to hear that from that process and from that experience, your brother was able to find a passion and narrow it down and get people on side and really make it happen
Well, I
for
have to
himself.
say, I don't know what the general experience of individuals going through that process, but my brother, he's a Taurus. I don't know if anybody's astrology familiar, but they are the bull. And he, exactly, Angela gets it. She knows my brother as well. And he is literally like bull by the horns. If he has something in his mind, he is going to charge, and he wants to do it. He will not let it
Right.
go. And power to him. I wish I had that kind of dedication, but he was gung-ho about turning his dream into a reality, whatever that looked like. And as someone who, I've had pie in the sky dreams too. And like I said, I'm always someone with different projects on the go. I was like, cool, this is your dream. Let's figure it out.
Good.
Like,
Good.
why not?
Now, you were generous enough to share a story with us for our 75th anniversary, and I'm just going to read a quote from your story,
You guys
and then
already almost got me crying with the passport funding story. So if I start now, I apologize in advance. I don't remember what I
No
said, but I feel
worry,
like
no
it's cute.
worry. You can become verklempt and we won't matter. It
Oh,
won't matter
God.
at all. So, a quote from your story is, when you think about a family member with any sort of challenge, be it physical, mental, or whatever, belonging is the biggest challenge because they're trying to move through a world that was not built for them. So you mentioned here that your family emigrated to Canada in the 70s, and
Yeah.
you were born in Canada and have lived
Yeah.
here since since you were born.
Mhm. Literally.
And so
Not
you've seen
saying
some.
when that was.
You already did. You already said 1980. I'll
Damn.
remind. It's okay. But age is
You
good.
got me.
Better than the alternative. So how do you feel about accessibility and inclusion today, as perhaps your parents experienced it when they first came, or your experience growing up the last couple of decades, as seen through your eyes and also through your brothers?
I mean, a whirlwind, maybe too intense, but it's definitely in waves. It's very up and down. You know, I feel like especially recently, post-COVID, I think we saw a really, really strange kind of going back to a real selfishness and a lack of understanding of people not really wanting to be concerned about people with whether it was their health special needs, you know, wearing masks became such a drama. So on that front, it was kind of a reminder that, you know, since the 70s and 80s and, you know, when my brother was first diagnosed and they were thinking that he wouldn't be as high functioning as he is and wouldn't get as far as he is, you know, like he went to college, he graduated high school, like they didn't think that, as far as I remember, that those things were a possibility for him. So he obviously broke all the barriers that were initially set for him. So definitely on the one hand, that's the whirlwind, right? Like he was given, you know, because of my parents and their advocacy for him, and then now because of his own advocacy and my advocacy as well, he was given a lot of opportunities. He was given a lot of chances to access that belonging, whether it was through special education programs or volunteer programs. Like he's a superstar volunteer. He would love to do all these different things, from the Pan Am Games, the Indigenous Games. I think he did, what was that one where Prince Harry met Meghan?
Invictus.
That's the one. He was there. That's the only reason I know about those games. Is that not sad? But he was there. I know about them because of my brother as well. So again, there was a lot. It was wonderful seeing him get those opportunities, and is because obviously value and community, or sorry, belonging and community are strong values within our community here at large, Ontario. But I still have moments where, exactly like what I said, this is a world. Yeah, Angela Pan Am, both the Pan Ams. I think he's done Special O as well, some stuff there. Angela would know better than me. Like those two are besties. Like if you see them at a community living Toronto event, like they're both just off networking in either corner. Like Angela and Amir are the stars. But, you know, there's still challenges. The world is still not fully, you know, built for any, you know, I'm somewhat neurodiverse as well. And I notice it even in just the way I had to deal with life when I was younger, as well as being a grown up, air quotes grown up, and trying to still navigate the world and understand where my challenges may come from. So layer on top of that, you know, what my brother had dealt with, you do see the gaps still. So to answer your question, I still believe that it's up and down. However, I definitely also know that I can be a bit jaded and a bit negative sometimes, I've been told. So I do think that the frequency of belonging and the ability to connect and belong and have those moments of community far outnumber the challenges. And
Well,
that is the
that's good to
shift
hear.
yeah, and that's the shift that's been happening, even though they still remain. And we should definitely not rest on our laurels thinking
Yeah.
that we're done and everyone's equal and being treated the same. We're not there yet. Again, to me, I think COVID was a really harsh reminder of like, oh, there are some folks out there that we really still need to reach, or some folks that we lost along the way and need to get them back now, whatever the
Yeah,
case may
yeah.
be. But that being said, if I were to really step back and zoom out, the overall landscape is shifting more into that positive direction for
Right.
sure.
So I wanted to, that's a great answer, and good to hear that sort of your observation of that that journey. Still many gaps, but progress has has definitely been made.
Mhm.
One of the new areas around community and engagement that we've seen in the last couple decades, the last decade in particular, is sort of social media and community
Mhm.
and the relation there. And you're involved in that in a professional sense, right? You do a
I
lot
am.
of social media activities. At
I
Community Living
do.
Toronto, we've been trying to build out and strengthen this as a new way of building community, building belonging. We're on all of the
Absolutely.
kind of major platforms. We're doing things like this where we're chatting with people and doing webinars, and we're starting to
Right.
record them and sort of do more of a podcast format. Can you
Love
maybe
it.
give us some, and there's always a question, why would you do this? Is it worth the effort? Is it real community? Can you give us your perspective on our efforts there, and maybe some sense for people listening as to the importance of that, or what's your experience been?
Oh gosh, it's paramount. Like important doesn't even begin to cover it. I think that it's a generational thing getting people on side with the idea that it's still community and it's still connection, even though it's through a digital um, mechanism. You
Mhm.
know, I come from a family of engineers and communicators. So telecommunications, social media, like we slid right in. And, you know, like my mom is a champ texter. She's all over Facebook. She has more Instagram followers than I do. Like it's in the genes, it's in the fabric. We get it. But from a professional as well as just a general belonging and community standpoint, social media is a way to bring people together that really removes so many barriers. So if you're talking about someone like me, who a lot of my family is overseas, Facebook, Instagram, either WhatsApp, even if you want to think of that as a social media platform, without these tools, I wouldn't be able to, you know, be in contact with family that's far away as regularly. You know, I remember being young and my mom writing letters, you know, and having to save that one phone call. So for just a way to connect with people in a way that's more consistent, in a way that can be more poignant and heartfelt because you're getting the visual, you're getting the sound, you're getting all of that. It's so impressive and so important for that that we've been able to come that far as a society, that we're bridging these long distance gaps. And from a storytelling perspective, it's also absolutely paramount and immense. Without, you know, the way that social media has given people the tools to share their own stories, their own experiences, and to connect that way. I can't think of another time in history that we've had that. And, you know, going back to what you were saying about from a professional standpoint, like it's a metric now that, you
Yeah.
know, from the community living perspective, if you're, you know, I think when you had our pre-meeting for this, we talked about lobbying and the impact of storytelling and lobbying, and fundraising and lobbying are two sides of the same coin. Fundraising is obviously an aspect here, but also just general awareness. So for community living, an organization like you dealing with such a vulnerable population where not everyone may have a family member who is part of that population like I do, so they may not have that personal connection to care and be engaged. But, you know, people watch TikToks about puppies and kittens, and they may not have a puppy and kitten at home, but
Yeah.
it's something that is part of that human experience. It pulls on the heartstrings. It tickles those empathy, you know,
It draws
feels you have
draws draws
inside.
draws people in.
It
Yeah.
draws people
And
in. And,
we
you know,
it
talking about the lack of connection people had during COVID, or that lack of understanding people had, you know, what was the big thing we were focused on during COVID? It was numbers, it was
yeah.
metrics, it was black and white. And I think that was an area where we lost a lot of people. So if you bring it back to what's the importance of social media, I think it really is that human storytelling aspect where you add color, you're adding breath to, and you're adding life to an idea, much more than black and white
So
numbers on a
using
page.
using thinking of social media and these various platforms as a tool to build on and engage and further engage people
Mhm.
with each other, not
And
as a
share.
substitute for community, but as an augmentation to
Absolutely.
it.
It's
We
another way. It's not
yeah,
a separate way
it's
to
not a replacement
communicate. It's
for.
just a different way to
Right.
communicate. Yeah.
Right, that's great. We talked the other day about the campaign that the sector's been on,
Mhm.
our hashtag 5 to Survive campaign, right?
Mhm.
And we had an online digital petition that we signed that got, so I think we're up to about 12,000
That's great.
signatures, which is amazing. And I was at a lunch last week with the Minister of Finance and stood in line to say hello and
Handshake.
all that.
Yep.
And he, as soon as he saw me, he said, I know about your 5 to Survive campaign, and
And I saw the
you know,
numbers of the
good. Yeah,
petition.
saw that. Yeah. So, I mean, it does have an impact. So,
Oh, for sure.
We're-
And I think that goes to show the different audiences. Sorry to interrupt you, Brad.
Yeah.
There's definitely still the individuals that will look at the metrics and look at the numbers
Yeah.
and need to know that. But there is so much value to that storytelling because of the way that, human beings can't wrap their heads around the idea of tens of thousands of
Yeah.
people, but they can very easily wrap their heads around
One
this
story.
face, this family.
Yes. Yeah.
Like there's things that everyone can relate to, whether they've experienced them or not. And it's that personalization, that personification
So
that
people
adds it.
being willing to share those stories and make themselves
Yes.
a little vulnerable, put them out there.
Yeah.
And we've had people do that as part of this campaign, and as our 75th
Right
anniversary
here.
piece. Your family being one of them. We're
Yeah.
just one final question as we
Sure.
wrap things up. As you know, our 75th anniversary was all about belonging, and you've talked about sort of your experience with inclusion and how that's played out. But what does belonging mean to you?
Belonging to me is just that feeling of safety and comfort and care that comes with knowing that you're part of a community, knowing that people have your back, knowing that you're not going to be turned away for being a certain way, saying a certain thing, looking a certain way. I leverage that word so much more than inclusion lately. Part of the work that I do is equity, the legacy acronym, diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I've started to focus much more about belonging and justice, because to me, justice is the big part, what the big guys can do, the governments, large organizations. Belonging is the piece that we can contribute to as individuals, because that's what we give each other, right? Bringing someone into a fold, making someone feel welcome. The idea of inclusion was just, okay, you may look different than the usual people we hire, or whatever the case may be. We're going to open the door and bring you on in anyway. But inclusion stops there. Inclusion stops at, we've just brought you in. Belonging picks up after that, and making people stay, making people feel comfortable enough to stay where they are. And then that just perpetuates to bringing more people in. And because you're seeing that authenticity, that real comfort, that real safety of knowing that they feel like they belong, like that's the real difference. And that's the type of thing that I want everyone, from my brother, every community living client, every person on this planet, we all deserve to feel that.
Great way to end. Thanks. Thanks
you.
for your support for us over the years. Thanks for Amir for all the stuff he's contributed to, and thanks for
pleasure.
taking time this afternoon. Really appreciate it.
Anytime. Thank you all for all the amazing work that you do.
Thank you. Petronella, back to you.
All right, thank you so much, Nadia, for sharing your story and your personal connection to your brother. Hearing you saying that is very moving, and there are a few comments in the chat, if I may just read a couple of them for you. Joe Pesot said, I think Petra is still involved with the Mix monthly social gathering in Scarborough, so we are doing our best to sit on these stars on net and not let them go. And Angela said, you are a star, Nadia, and seeing you and your family willing to go on that ride with Amir is wonderful. So some great lessons to learn from your story, and thank you so much for sharing them. And as we have heard from Nadia and everyone else today, stories connect purpose to heart, and the impact of storytelling and awareness is very important. So if you have any stories or experiences that can help other families around caregiving, managing stress, or new opportunities, then please feel free to reach out to our team. And I'm sure Minal has already put your details in the chat. So thanks so much, Brad, and thanks so much, Nadia. So as we come to the end of our family and friends update today, I would like to let you know that our next one will be released on April 15th, and this one will be a recorded one. So we want to thank everyone who shared their pictures of their fun socks last week as part of our Lots of Socks campaign to celebrate World Down Syndrome Day. We really enjoyed seeing a lot of pictures, so we thank you for sending those for sending those pictures. We have a community spotlight happening tomorrow, a live stream with our COTO influencers talking about World Down Syndrome Day and how we can challenge stereotypes in daily lives. Join us on our CLTO influencers and CLTO's Instagram and Facebook at 1 p.m. Once again, thank you for your continued support. We look forward to sharing more stories from our community. Thank you, everyone, and have a great afternoon.